Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the Wordsmith's Forge. I am Matthew J. Coran. Today I'm going to continue on my previous video titled The Spiritual Battle, Part 1. And now this is a Spiritual Battle, Part 2. This one's going to be a little bit more focused. I was kind of all over the place in the last one. Not that I regret it, but this one I have a very specific topic I want to cover, and that is self-reliance and how futile it is, right? So I'm just going to jump into my book a little bit here. This is chapter 10, From Where True Power Comes, which kind of might give you a little bit of an indication where I'm going with this. And so Colin is fighting this mysterious stranger who claims to want to take Colin's power back, meaning it wasn't Colin's to begin with, and now he's not going to have it anymore. And obviously Colin takes issue with that, and so the two of them clash, and the man is surprisingly powerful, even for having no weapon, right? It's like Colin thinks he has an advantage with having a sword against an unarmed man, but he's quickly realizing that's not the case. And so there's a couple passages I want to go over particularly. But basically how this goes is the man has a breath singer ability of his own that is unknown to Colin. Right? So Colin has his harmonic abilities, which give him basically superhuman speed. This man has, and Colin's aura, his ruach, if you will, it has a color, right? Like every breath singer has a different color ruach. Colin's it's like a golden, right? That's the color of the harmonics. And this stranger has a ruach that's like a deep green, which Colin has never seen before. And so he has no idea what these powers are, but whatever it is, it gives him the ability to keep up with the superhuman speed of a master harmonic, right? Because Colin is said to be the most powerful breath singer in the land. Said to be. And so this is very baffling for him. He has no idea what this guy's powers are. He has no idea how he's able to keep up and how he's so inhumanly strong. And Colin finds that the tables are turning and he's starting to get overwhelmed by this man. And so there's a paragraph here that kind of reflects Colin's inner turmoil as this is going on. Colin was too much out of breath to say a single word, and this man seemed like he barely broke a sweat. How? How could one man have so much power? Colin thought as distress consumed him. He thought of his kingdom, how much damage he had left to undo. He thought of his son, and of needing to leave him a proper example and inheritance for when he took the throne. He thought of all his loyal subjects who stood with him against the odds of dethroning the most powerful king in history. This stranger, who appeared out of nowhere, now threatened to take all of that away. Because it's important to remember, Colin was the first of his line as he usurped the throne from King Xand. And then, there's one more line after that, its own paragraph. Colin was nothing without his power. And so we see here that Colin strongly identifies with his own abilities, right? He was the warrior king who took the throne by force with his superior abilities and his superior ability to lead. And he sees his image of himself being closely linked to the power he wields. Right? And so he admits to himself through the third person narrative, Colin is nothing without his power. He truly believes that. And so this man is like his worst nightmare, someone stronger than him who's coming to take his power away. And we see the struggle of Colin because he's not just a narcissist, right? Who's just in love with his own power. He has good intentions with it, right? Because he's thinking about all of the people he's serving, like his own son, his kingdom, his subjects. He's thinking about all the ways he's been using his power to serve, which is important to understand that. And it shows that he's not in this for himself, and he has the qualities of a good leader, which is service. But he makes the mistake of thinking he's the one doing it. And that's kind of how this ties into spiritual combat and the bulk of what I wanted to talk about in this video, because it's important to recognize that our gifts are just that. They're gifts, right? What do we mean when we say we have gifts? Because can you give yourself a gift? The answer is no, right? Because if you give it to yourself, you're only giving what you already have to yourself, right? It's a loop. It makes no sense, right? For it to be a gift, it's something you freely give to another person for no reason, right? And it's of cost to you, and you get nothing in return out of it. So you can't give a gift to yourself. It has to come from something. It has to come from something outside of yourself, and it's freely given. And so our gifts would have to come from the one who created us, right? In terms of like the things that we can naturally do that we excel at, and there's no particular reason why, right? Like there's just some people who are naturally better at athletics than others, right? They didn't give that to themselves. I mean, they can cultivate their gifts, right? They can build it up and become better athletes, but there are just some people who do have that natural athletic ability, like through no action of their own, and no one gave it to them. It's not like Captain America where they just shoot someone up with steroids and then they're just superhuman powerful, right? Like it defies any real explanation. People can say genetics and all that, but even if you think outside of physical abilities, right? Like think about some people have a natural ability to speak in public. Like they can speak publicly very well. They don't have that fear that a lot of other people have. Like there are people where if you ask them to speak even in front of like 20 people, they have like deer in the headlights looks, you know? Other people, it's like they can just do it. it's like nothing to them. And from my personal experience, I can testify that these are gifts that don't come from us, because I've experienced both ends of that spectrum with public speaking specifically. And it makes no sense how I've gone from one to the other outside of the context of spirituality. Because I was very introverted, and to a degree still am. Like, I love talking to people, don't get me wrong, but I find it very exhausting after a while, and I can't do it for very long. It's just a fact where, like, and like, you know, it depends on the subjects, you know, who I'm talking with, because there are just certain people, like, I can just talk to forever. But generally speaking, when just talking in public to people I don't know, it's very exhausting. And I used to have like a fear of it, you know, like I didn't like putting myself out there. I didn't have much confidence in myself, or I should say I didn't have very much confidence, period. And so I was always afraid of sticking out, because I had such a very low opinion of myself, right? And even though my confidence is much higher now, it didn't shift until my faith did. I truly believe God gives us certain graces depending on what kind of virtues we cultivate, and also just through his own volition, through nothing we do ourselves. He'll just give us graces at certain points in our lives. And I started to really realize that later in life, within the past few years even, that I no longer had trouble speaking in public because what I was saying wasn't for my own benefit. Now, there are times where I'm tempted for it to be my own benefit, right? And I find that the more I give into those temptations are the times where I literally go stupid when I speak. I'm not nearly as eloquent and I'm not nearly as convincing when I speak, when it's about me. But when you speak to tell the truth about something or to help someone or in service of something, it's like the words just come. It's kind of crazy. I would get up and speak when I was put in charge of various missions activities, and I would have to speak in front of entire congregations. There's even one time I was interviewed, like literally on TV. It was like a local channel, or it might have even been a radio station. I don't even know. But I had no problem speaking because I wasn't speaking for my own sake, but for the service of God, because I was in the mindset of I have a mission, right? When I have a mission, I do whatever I can to fulfill that mission. I don't care how people see me because it doesn't matter, right? Even now, it's like I don't care what you think about me as you're listening to this. I just want to get the information across. And that's the truth of the matter, and that's why I can just do this, because it's not about me, right? And so, and like, I don't associate with my gifts. I see them as given to me by God for a certain purpose, and if I don't use them for that particular purpose, they're of no use, right? I'm making waste of it. And so getting back to Colin, he makes a mistake of identifying with his own abilities. He thinks it's him doing it, rather than them being a gift from God that he has no control over. And so he does have them, he is using them in service, but he thinks he's God servicing people, for lack of a better phrase, right? Like he thinks he's like he thinks he's the one bestowing these gifts upon people, rather than just seeing himself as a channel through which these gifts are flowing. And so they're being taken away for a time. It might be for a short while, it might be for a long while. But this stranger who takes the sword from him, which the stranger claims the sword was the source of his strength the entire time, he says, "Let me leave you with some parting advice, King. If your sense of power and self-worth come from this sword, you don't deserve this sword or your throne. I suggest taking a step back and doing some reflection. Otherwise, your kingdom's being run by a blind man. And if a blind man leads blind men, both will march off a cliff," the man said. And so this is on the tail end of, I think it was last week. I'm terrible with time. But we were reading a gospel passage of Jesus talking about the blind leading the blind. I can't remember what chapter verse. I think it was out of Luke. But it's absolutely true. If you're not grounded in God's mission for you, you're going to be misleading people, right? Because you don't even understand why you have the gifts you do. You're just using them however you please. And even if you're using them in service, it's still out of a form of selfishness, right? Because it's for your glory at the end of the day. And that's what King Colin's going to realize, he's going to have to realize, is because when he works for his own glory, he doesn't have a firm foundation to stand on. And there was like panic welling up within him as this man was overpowering him because he didn't want to lose his power, right? Because that's his entire image of himself, right? That's his sense of self-worth. When in reality, our sense of self-worth should come from the fact that we're made in the image of God, and we're conduits for his working through the world, right? And so, I forgot where I was going with that. But he's going to learn that his mission has nothing to do with his power, whether he has it or he doesn't, right? Because when I'm given the ability to speak, like I'm called to speak things that are true and things that can bring life to the hearer. If I don't do that and I make it about me, I just sound like an idiot, you know? And so I pray that I don't sound like an idiot and I do lead people to truth. But if I am not, then I pray that they do fall on my words do fall on deaf ears. And when it comes to confidence, I kind of want to get back to that because I talked about how I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself, and I corrected myself. Because the best kind of confidence isn't confidence in yourself. To a degree it is, where like you understand who you are and what you're doing, but confidence just means with faith. And when you have faith in God, you are going to be confident in what you're doing, right? Because you think about what your mission is, what God has given you to complete that mission, and you go out and do it. That's it. It's not about you. It's not about what you can do for people even. It's about what you do for God, and that's the peak of the virtue of charity, right? Charity is mentioned a lot in St. Paul's epistles, even though a lot of times it's incorrectly translated to love. But it's charity that is... what's the phrase? Let me just grab my Bible. It's in the first letter of Corinthians. I think it's chapter 13. I'm just going to flip to it real quick. Or was it 2 Corinthians? Oh, no, I'm just looking at the wrong page. Yeah, where it says, love suffers long and is kind. Charity suffers long and is kind. Charity does not envy. Charity does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Charity never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part that we prophesy in part. But that which is perfect has come. That which is in part will be done away. So that passage really does just sum up what I was just talking about. Charity is different from love. I really dislike the use of love in a general sense because It's vague and people redefine it all the time to mean whatever they want it to mean. But charity has a very specific definition, and no, it doesn't mean giving money to some random organization helping out allegedly people in Africa. Charity is loving your neighbor for the sake of God, not for your own sake. The sun's coming up. And so when we talk about our gifts and how we use them in the service of others, we do it out of charity. And that's what gives us the confidence to do things well, regardless of the outcome for us, regardless of the outcome for our neighbor even. Because there are sometimes you will lend a hand to help people and it might not seem like it's doing anything, right? But you do it anyway for the sake of God, right? We talk about the 2 commandments that Jesus said are the greatest of all. Love God and love your neighbor. You can't love your neighbor if you don't love God. And you can't love God if you don't love your neighbor. The two are intertwined. And so, yeah, in terms of the way things worked out for Colin, he's going to learn how to do things properly in charity for others rather than helping others for his own sake. And so I invite you to also meditate on what can you do in charity for the sake of God? What gifts were you given? How can you use them, not for your own sake or even for the sake of others, for your own self-aggrandizement, but how can you use them for the love of God and for the love of neighbor? Both at the same time, intertwined, not separate. And if you feel so inclined, you can share your reflections in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, take care and God bless.